The bustling airport buzzed with travelers rushing to their destinations, unaware that a storm was about to unfold in plain sight. Two officers locked their eyes on a young black man in uniform, his posture proud yet humble. Within moments, suspicion morphed into hostility, and their decision to act would change everything. They saw only the color of his skin, not the story etched into his past. But in just minutes, the truth they uncovered would leave them, and everyone watching utterly speechless. It was a cold morning when Marcus Johnson arrived at the airport, his duffel bag slung over his shoulder, his military uniform pressed to perfection. To the average traveler, he looked like any other soldier traveling home, but to Marcus, every step carried the weight of sacrifice. Years of deployment in harsh conditions had hardened him, yet the thought of finally reuniting with his mother after months overseas softened his heart. He wasn't just returning home. He was returning as a decorated soldier, one who had risked his life countless times for a country he deeply believed in. But airports are unpredictable spaces, a blend of celebration and suspicion. For Marcus, it wasn't the long lines or security checks that unsettled him, but the quiet glances he had grown accustomed to his whole life. Being a black man in uniform didn't shield him from prejudice. In some ways, it made him more of a target. Still, Marcus kept his composure. He reminded himself of the discipline instilled in him through years of service. As he walked toward his gate, he noticed two uniformed police officers trailing their eyes on him. At first, he brushed it off, assuming they were simply monitoring the crowd. But their gaze didn't waver. Their steps quickened, their expressions hardened. Marcus knew this look. It was the same suspicion that had followed him in malls, on sidewalks, and even in his own neighborhood. What he didn't know was that these officers had already made up their minds. To them, Marcus wasn't a soldier, returning home. He was just another black man who, in their eyes, didn't belong. The officers closed in, their voices sharp and commanding as they stopped Marcus in front of dozens of bystanders. Conversations hushed, and the busy terminal seemed to freeze, eyes shifting toward the scene unfolding. One officer demanded to see identification, his tone laced with suspicion rather than protocol. Marcus calmly complied, reaching into his pocket to retrieve his military ID, but instead of acknowledging it, the officer snatched it, glaring at Marcus as though it were counterfeit. "Where did you get this?" the officer asked, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. Murmurs spread through the crowd. To them, the sight was confusing. Why were officers interrogating a man clearly in uniform? But confusion quickly turned to discomfort as they noticed the tension thickening in the air. Marcus tried to explain, but his words were drowned out by the officer's orders. Within seconds, his hands were forced behind his back, cold steel cuffs locking tightly around his wrists. Gasps echoed through the terminal. Children clung to their parents. Phones came out, recording what was becoming yet another viral moment of injustice. Inside, Marcus felt the familiar sting of humiliation. It wasn't the first time his skin color had made him guilty in someone else's eyes, but the fact that it was happening in uniform, in the country he had sworn to protect, cut deeper than any battlefield wound. He wanted to shout, to demand respect, but years of discipline whispered to stay calm. He knew one wrong move could escalate the situation further. As he was escorted through the terminal, whispers followed him. What did he do? Why are they arresting him? The narrative was already forming in the minds of strangers. Marcus was being framed not as a hero, but as a suspect. The officers, meanwhile, justified their actions to themselves. They claimed Marcus matched a vague description of a suspect involved in criminal activity. But their aggression wasn't fueled by evidence, it was rooted in assumption, an assumption tied to the color of his skin. What they failed to realize, however, was that Marcus's story was much larger than their narrow perception. His journey, his sacrifices, and his status were about to come to light in a way that would shake not only them, but everyone watching. The murmurs grew louder, and the weight of judgment pressed heavily on Marcus. Yet he remained silent, holding onto his composure. For years he had endured bullets, bombs, and the deafening sound of war. This was another battlefield, one where dignity was his only weapon, and soon the truth would pierce through the injustice like a blade through silence. As Marcus was led toward the police station inside the airport, a senior officer stepped forward, curious about the commotion. He demanded to know why a soldier was being paraded in handcuffs. The arresting officers quickly explained, waving Marcus's ID as if it were a forgery, but the senior officer's eyes narrowed. He recognized the name instantly. Marcus Johnson wasn't just any soldier. He was a decorated war hero, awarded for his bravery in saving an entire unit during a dangerous overseas mission. His story had made national headlines months earlier, celebrated as an example of courage and sacrifice. The senior officer's voice turned cold as he ordered the cuffs removed immediately. The arresting officers hesitated, but the truth was undeniable. Within moments, Marcus's wrists were free, but the damage was already done. Silence swept over the crowd as the realization spread. The man they had just watched being humiliated was not a criminal, but a hero who had risked everything for the very country that had just degraded him. Phones continued recording, capturing every second of the officer's shame. The arresting officers stumbled over excuses, but their words fell flat. Their judgment had not only stripped a soldier of his dignity, but also exposed the ugly reality that no uniform, no medal, no sacrifice could shield a black man from prejudice. For Marcus, the cuffs may have been removed, but the sting of injustice remained. In that moment, the climax was not in his vindication, but in the undeniable truth revealed to all. Racism had once again chosen blindness over honor. As Marcus adjusted his uniform and walked away from the officers, the eyes of the crowd followed him, not with suspicion now, but with respect, guilt, and awe. Some applauded softly, others hung their heads in discomfort, realizing they had witnessed both the cruelty of prejudice and the resilience of dignity. The senior officer apologized, but Marcus offered no reply. Apologies could not erase the humiliation, nor could they undo the reality of what had just happened. He walked on, head held high, his silence louder than any words. The videos taken that day spread across social media within hours. Millions watched as a decorated black soldier was wrongfully arrested, his story igniting outrage and sparking conversations about the persistence of racism in places meant to represent freedom. For many, it was a wake-up call. For others, it was a reminder of a truth they had always known. Marcus did not seek revenge, nor did he seek validation. His service spoke louder than any accusation. His life was proof of sacrifice, loyalty, and courage. Yet what cut deepest was not the arrest itself, but the knowledge that if he had not been recognized, the narrative might have ended very differently. The story carried with it a lesson too powerful to ignore. Racism doesn't pause for uniforms, titles, or medals. It sees only what it wants to see. And until society confronts this truth, heroes like Marcus will continue to be treated as suspects before being acknowledged as men. So the next time you see a headline like this, ask yourself, what story lies behind the assumptions we make in an instant? How many more Marcus Johnsons must endure humiliation before respect replaces prejudice? The answer to that question is not his to give. It's ours to confront.